It's 7 o'clock, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. And let's start off with the roll call.
Thank you. All right. Member Bowman?
Present.
Member Kerr? Here. Chair Priven?
Here.
Member Papalia?
Here.
And Member Trainer? Here.
Thank you. Okay, and the next is the land acknowledgement, and it's my understanding that some of the committees actually rotate who reads this. So if I'm open to volunteers, if anybody wants to read this.
I can read it. Can you put it back up? I don't have it memorized. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Lishan. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Albany tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home.
Thank you. Next up is the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll second it. Okay.
Any discussion? Okay. Can I get a vote?
Okay. Member Bowman?
Yes.
Member Kerr? Yes. Chair Priven?
Yes.
Member Papalia?
Yes.
And Member Trainer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay. Next is announcements. Do we have any announcements?
Yes, I did have one just as a follow-up to the discussion with the KPI subcommittee and the presentation that was given. I did just want to share the addition that we made to the staff report to include the input from the Financial Advisory Committee with the reports that are going to council. And you can see the staff reports that we submit to council if you go to our city, if you go under the CALB community media and go to the agendas page. If you go to the council meeting, and what date was that? I believe March. So if you go to that agenda, there are the two staff reports for the presentation on the ACFR and the quarter budget review. And if you look at both of these reports, we've incorporated the section to include the comments from the committee that was brought up during the, where is the staff report? Thank you. During the presentation. And during the meeting. So that is, if you go down, it's the final page since it's a new addition to the staff report from the committee to the council. I believe, there we go. So we have the comments here. So that was present on the both staff reports for the ACFR and for the budget review. So just wanted to point that out, and that's where you can find the discussion that's had going forward.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have an announcement, which is that I'm going to be in New York during the next meeting, so I can, to the extent I can participate, I have to participate as a member of the public. So Member Bowman is going, or Vice Chair Bowman is gonna chair the meeting, and it also means that we need a quorum of 3 people. So please let Cassie know if you're not going to be able to make the next meeting, because we want to make sure that we have 3 people in person.
I have a question about it. Does that mean that you are not part of the quorum because you're not present here?
Correct. I can be a member of the public if not, or to the committee.
I'm having eye surgery at the end of the month, and like the 29th, and I don't feel like I may not want to be here for the in person.
Okay.
Because of the lights and stuff that are here.
Okay.
And so I was not planning on being here in person.
Okay. So should we talk this month about what to do for the next meeting?
So there are, I mean, you could have a quorum of 3, and that
Yes.
would be that. Or there are provisions, 2 mechanisms in the Brown Act that would allow you to participate virtually. One is the old-fashioned rules where you can post the agenda on your front door. You can allow anybody who wants to come in and comment to come into your home and do all of those things. That's the old-fashioned way pre-COVID that anybody who, if a member needed to participate remotely, that like used to be over the phone and everything. It was so much fun. The second mechanism is there is state law in place that allows for an emergency or a just cause exception for missing a meeting in person, but being allowed to participate from within the jurisdiction at a location that you do not need to disclose. So you don't need to post the agenda on your home, et cetera. We would just need to read into the record that there is an exception and have the committee approve that the exception is acceptable to have you participate as a member of the committee, even though you are not physically present. It doesn't go for vacation trips typically.
No, it would be
Medical
definitely a medical
is-
issue.
Absolutely.
You won't be able to attend at all. Not
I will
virtually.
not be in the jurisdiction, let's put it that way, so I think I wouldn't be able to.
And I should add that I also will not be in the jurisdiction on May 3rd.
Okay, so let's,
Oh.
maybe, not right now. It sounds like
Okay.
we need to talk about that meeting. And
Could you explain you mean jurisdiction, you have to be in the city of Albany to remotely participate?
As a member of the commission, yes.
Okay, didn't know that.
Is there the possibility to change the date of the meeting, or is that a fixed thing that can't be changed?
We do still need 3 in person for a quorum. Thank you. City clerk, listening, keeping us
Yeah.
safe from harm. You can absolutely change the date. You could make, yes, you can change the date.
We'll just have to confirm the schedule with the clerk, but we can do that. We'll discuss.
We'll discuss it.
And plan it out.
Okay. 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 Any other announcements? Okay. Okay, the other announcement is just, I like to set up sort of a timeline of the meeting that hopefully we can keep to, so we know we get out around 9 o'clock. So I was hoping the first 4 items, roughly 10 minutes. The next item is the presentation by GovInvest, roughly 50 minutes, I'm hoping we can keep to on that. Then we have the property tax revenues. Item 5.2 would be 30 minutes. And then 10 minutes for each of the, 10 minutes for the sugar sweetened beverages, and then 10 minutes for the subcommittee updates, and then 10 minutes for items 7 through 9. So don't have to take a formal vote, but does that seem reasonable? Okay. Okay. So I'll ask everybody's effort to stay to that timeline. Okay, any public comment? Nope. Okay, well, we are exactly on 10 minutes. Okay, so item 5.1, presentation from GovInvest.
Is it okay for me to sit over there where I have a better view of the presentation? Is there any, keeps me from doing that?
I think it's fine, but if you talk, you need to talk into a microphone so that people can hear.
I can see it better that way. Till I get my.
Ira can't see it at all, he's just blind. Oh, it is, it's in the screen too, okay, got it.
I wanted to get the impression that I memorized the entire thing.
Welcome, thank you for coming here for the presentation.
Anything you want to say before I start with all of this? No? Okay. And thank you for having me. Again, my name is Ira Summer. I'm one of the senior financial consultants with GovInvest. Just in terms of background, I spent 30 years as a consulting actuary for agencies in California and across the country on issues of pension, health plans, got released for good behavior after 30 years. Went off and taught finance and economics to MBAs. So if I come out lecturing like I'm a teacher, it's bad practice. And then I got sucked back in to do this again, again, again. So glad to be here. I'm going to start out talking about the pension plan. When I normally do this, I assume that most of you do not have years of background as a pension actuary. So I want to start out with the basics of how the whole thing works. If you go to the next slide, actually, talk about what I'm going to talk about the pension basics, how CalPERS works, what they're doing, where you are, then go into how your agency compares to other agencies throughout California, and talk about what's changed since the last actuarial evaluations and the impact of those changes, and then talk about what you might be able to do addressing unfunded liability. So if we go to the next slide, the math underlying all of the calculations in the actuarial evaluation reports, very complicated. The concepts behind them actually really simple. Next slide shows it basically all comes down to money in equals money out. The money coming into CalPERS is supposed to be enough to cover the money going out of CalPERS. The money going out of CalPERS basically comes from two sources, benefits and expenses. And of those two, by far the largest is benefits. CalPERS charges 10 basis points or 0.1% of the assets as an administrative fee, making them one of the most cost-effective benefit administrators in the country. So almost all of it, again, benefits going out the door. Money coming into CalPERS comes from three sources: employee contributions, city contributions, and investment return. And of those three, by far the largest is investment return. Depending on how well funded you are and how the markets are doing, investment return is going to be anywhere from 60 to 90% of the money coming into the plan. Now that's great news in terms of keeping your costs down over time. It's a problem when markets are volatile, which they have been for the last decade or two. When that happens, when investment returns go down, then city contributions have to go up. Now, CalPERS does what they can to smooth that out over time using a variety of actuarial methodologies, and I'll talk about them a little bit later. They also take into account a lot of assumptions as to what's going to be happening in the future. Next slide. Those basically fall into two categories. Economic assumptions, the ones related to money, things like investment returns, salary growth, inflation, and demographic assumptions, the ones related to people. So things like figuring out when your employees are expected to retire, how many of your employees might become disabled and start collecting benefits early, how long are your retirees going to live, how many people are actually going to leave employment and not collect benefits, all to make sure that there's always enough money to pay all the benefits you promised, the city promised to all of your employees for all of their retirement till they're dead. Now, CalPERS does this based on your people and your benefits. Next slide shows that you basically have, it says two, it means three benefit structures for your police and fire employees. You've got a tier one for people hired May 13th, 2012 and earlier. It is called the 3% of 50, it's referred to as the 3% of 55 formula. What that means is that if somebody gets hired at age 30 and retires at age 55 from the police force, that's 25 years. Their pension benefit is 25 times 3% or 75% of their pay each month for the rest of their lives. As it shows here, it has that COLA, a cost of living adjustment for retirees, says 2%, but it's basically a maximum of 2%, and I'll talk about an exception to that in just a moment. To get that, employees make employee contributions every pay period of 9% of their pay. In May of 2012, the city created a tier two, which had a similar pension formula, but instead of being the highest one-year pay, it's based on the highest 3-year average pay at retirement. So that's your tier two. It also applies to people who get hired now who come with service from another agency and were originally hired prior to 2013. They would go into that tier 2. For people hired 2013 later, or 2013 or later, and later, I don't know, one of those, they're in the PEPRA formula. PEPRA stands for Public Employee Pension Reform Act. It was passed by the Brown administration in 2012. One of the things it did is it created consistent benefit levels for every agency throughout California. So every safety member throughout California gets the same 2.7 to 57 plan that people in Albany get. So you're no longer trying to compete against Berkeley or Richmond, try and get a better formula than they have to try and just sort of step over each other to keep getting better benefits, keep having the same, your best people to stay here and work here. The other major thing that it did is it changed the employee contributions from being a fixed percentage of pay to being 50% of normal cost. Normal cost is the actuarial term for the cost for each year of service as it is earned. So the employee contributions right now for the upcoming fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024 would be 13.75% of pay. So basically, slightly lower benefit, slightly higher contribution. Also, in addition to the safety benefit structures for the non-police and fire, next page, you have 3 miscellaneous benefit structures. Same thing. First one is for people hired November 27, 2011 and earlier. Second tier got created for people between November 28, 2011 and December 31st, 2012, and then the PEPRA formula kicks in for 2013 and later. And for PEPRA, the benefit is slightly lower, employee contributions based on normal costs. So as CalPERS assumptions change and the cost of each year of service changes, those contributions change accordingly. So what's basically happening is across time, so actually let's go to the next slide. Next slide basically shows that as of June 30, 2021, you had a question.
Yeah, before you get too far, what was the final pay period again?
Back up a second to the previous slide. It's in this case, it's all 36 months. So what that means is that you take the average pay for the highest 36 months of pay that they made.
Okay.
So instead of making it being sort of, 2% times 62 times 30 years, 60% of taking 2% of each year's pay, you figure out what they're making at their highest 36 months, and it becomes 60% of that.
And then one more question. After 55 or whatever the final age on there, can you continue to accrue?
You continue to accrue service, and in some cases, the multiplier, the 2%, 2.5, whatever it is, actually increases to some extent. It doesn't increase forever. So taking it later can give you a higher benefit, and that's why not everybody is assumed to retire at those ages.
Okay.
And just as a follow-up on Kyle's questions, it would appear to me that there would be an ability to improve your retirement benefits if you worked a lot of overtime in your last 36 months. And are there agencies that you are familiar with from your perspective who have made policy decisions regarding overtime for more senior employees?
There used to be a lot of people taking advantage of overtime and things like that. Right now, one of the PEPRA changes was to make the formula based on your regular pay across time. So it was an effort to end pension spiking.
But it still exists at the last 36 months.
It's still during the last 36 months. Now, people can, and this happens a lot more in the police and fire ranks than it does in miscellaneous. But there are people who will take a lot of special shifts that get higher pay during that time period and bump their pay up a little bit higher. So there is still some pension spiking that goes on, but it's been diminished significantly based on the changes in PEPRA.
Thank you.
I just wanted to chime in that even with the classic plans, a lot of overtime is not considered subject to PERS, so it wouldn't increase their income significantly. There are certain overtimes that are, but not regular straight overtime. Typically does not boost income for PERS contributions.
Although, again, this, in many other municipalities outside of California, it's still an issue, and it used to be an issue in California.
I guess my real question underlying all this is there any policy position that we could take that would further protect, or maybe further protection's not necessary, against that kind of manipulation of final retirement income?
A lot of the pension reforms have been put in place to get rid of most of the big ones. One thing that I will say, and I don't know if this is going to come out as a negative or a positive, but police officers and firefighters spend a lot of time talking about their pensions and figuring out every possible way of maximizing their pensions.
As they should.
Yes. And so they figure out every loophole that's there. Getting rid of all those loopholes, if it turns into something big, it's something you want to deal with through collective bargaining and other issues. If it's something that's small, it's usually not worth the effort. And again, they got rid of the big things that were causing significant pension spiking and causing unfunded liability to occur because the final pay was so much, the pension benefits ended up jumping up so significantly from what people were expecting them to be based on career trajectories. So a lot of that was taken care of. I'm never going to say never look at those things, but I don't think it's the biggest thing to be concerned about at this point. And by the way, I should have said this earlier, although I don't think it's going to be a problem here. If you have questions, interrupt me. I do find it's always much better to get your questions now and not lose you on slide 5 if we're going to be doing this for 50 minutes. Back to where I was, as of June 30, 2021, your workforce was pretty much 60% classic, 40% Pepra. Now, across time, classics in black, Pepras in green, across time, what's going to happen is your longer service people are going to retire, they're going to leave. New people coming in are mostly going to be the Pepra people. So your population is going to shift. Within 5 years, it's going to flip around, so it's going to be 60% Pepra, 40% classic. 10 years, 75% Pepra, 25% classic. It's going to continue on. So if we look at the next slide, what you're going to see is that your cost, your normal cost, your cost of each year as a percentage of pay will be coming down gradually across time from about 15% right now, 15% of pay, down to about 11% of pay over the next 20 plus years as your population makes that shift from one group to the other. And again, that's the same phenomenon we're seeing for all agencies throughout California. So again, that's the underlying basics. Let's talk about how your agency compares to other agencies throughout California. Let's go to the next slide. When I do this, I try and take a look at basically the two most important metrics. Next slide. One of them is the funded percentage. Basically a question of, are you on target? Measures your plan assets divided by your plan liabilities. This is done as of June 30, 2022. Now, the reason I picked June 30, 2022 is that's the date of the most recent actuarial valuation report released by CalPERS. CalPERS released the June 30, 2022 actuarial evaluation reports in August of 2023. Those are the reports used to determine your required contribution to CalPERS for the 24-25 fiscal year that starts this July. So that's the most recent valuation, so we measure them as of that. Second metric is total contribution percentage, which is your actuarially determined contribution, the required amount for you to pay to CalPERS, divided by pensionable income, basically the dollar amount divided by pay, so we can measure you against agencies of different sizes and have a reasonable metric for the amounts payable in fiscal year 24-25. When I say actuarially determined contribution, next slide, what I basically mean, the contributions come in two pieces. There's a normal cost, I keep using that term. Normal cost is the cost for each year of service as it's earned. It's generally paid as a percentage of pay. Second piece is an amortization of the unfunded liability. So to the extent that you're not 100% funded, and spoiler alert, you're not 100% funded, they basically have you catch up to 100% funded over a certain period of time. Right now, new unfunded liability gets spread out over a 20-year period. The combination of those two is the total employer contribution. That's the minimum amount that you can pay to CalPERS. CalPERS is happy to take more of your money if you want to send it in their direction. So let's look at, and when we do this, next slide, we try and compare you against similar agencies. So you are in what CalPERS refers to as the risk pool. In 2013, CalPERS created the risk pool. Prior to that, there was a problem. Small agencies would have one police officer or a firefighter become disabled in the line of duty or die in the line of duty. And contribution rates would shoot through the roof because the liability for that person who died at age 30, paying for their entire life, for their spouse, shot contribution rates right through the roof. So what they did is they took all the small agencies and put you into a risk pool. So you're basically sharing. It's basically like insurance. So you're sharing all the demographic risk among other agencies throughout California. So you're one of the smaller agencies, you're in the risk pool. We compared your miscellaneous plans against other miscellaneous plans that are in the risk pool. We compared your safety plans to other safety plans that are in the risk pool, pepper plans against pepper plans, the non-pepper plans against non-pepper plans. And this is what we found. Next slide. So your tier one, your oldest, the one with the most liability, you're 68.7% funded. So you're basically right in the middle of where agencies are throughout California right now. You'll notice a lot between 60 and 70, also a big chunk between 70 and 80. Almost everybody's between 60 and 80%. You're in that same range where they are.
Can I ask you, I mean, it looks like we're lower, so I guess I'm
You are a little lower than average, but again, 68.7, pretty close to 70. You're right around the middle, and so many of them are bunched up between 65 and 75%. That you're basically where most of the agencies are throughout California right now. And if you're off by a little, it's a percent, which is, that can change very quickly. Next slide, your contributions, 90% of pay, higher than average. Again, combination of the normal cost plus the payment towards the unfunded liability. And because your unfunded liability is where it is, and your tier one group, a little bit smaller than some because you created a tier two. So there aren't quite as many people in the tier one. You're spreading your unfunded liability over a slightly smaller group. That makes your contributions a little higher than average. So you're at 90% for that group. Definitely not the worst in the state. You can see some further to the right of the slide. For tier two on the next slide, you see your funded percentage, 84.7%. A little below the bulk between 85 and 90, but again, not far from it. You're a little below the average where most of the agencies are, but everybody's bunched very tightly here in funded percentage because almost all of the tier two plans were created between 2010 and 2012. And you were created at the same time, so they were all created at the same time, at the same market conditions, and almost all very similar plan structures. Contributions, as you can see, also going to fall. Next slide. Right in the middle at 11.7%. So again, your benefits, the cost of this is pretty similar to what we're seeing for other agencies for tier two throughout the state. EPRA, next slide, you're showing right in the middle, again, all the same plan formula, all the same market conditions. I expect everybody to be almost all the same. The reason there are some further to the right is some agencies stuck extra money into their pepper plan to try and get them better funded. And that's why they're off in that group on the right. Contributions, also next slide, all bunched together. So at 8.2%, you're where almost everybody is at this point. So again, overall, you're pretty much on the miscellaneous side, right around the middle of where things are. Not terrible, not fantastic. You're in okay shape. Next slide, let's look at the safety. So for the tier one, compared to other tier one plans, you're at 70.3%. Again, I would call that in the middle. Again, it looks like a little bit higher, but again, you're right in the middle. You're right at the line, right where that is, between 60 and 80. That's where most of the plans are. Next slide, contributions for that, 72%. Again, very high number, but right around the middle where agencies are throughout California for Tier 1. Next slide. For the PEPRA plan, you are at 84.7% funded again, for some reason just slightly below the average. Contributions, though, on the next slide, have you right in the middle at 14.6%. So again, overall, not very different than many of the other agencies throughout California. Do we have any other slides on this? Did we put Tier 2 for? Oh, we did the fire separate from the police. That's what we did. Okay, this is why I don't have the whole thing memorized. Sorry. Police, 72%, right in the middle. Next slide. Contributions, a little bit lower than average, 85%. Slide after that, the PEPRA, 84.7 again. We're seeing that number over and over again with your agency. I don't know what you're doing for that to get just below average. And contribution rates, again, right in the middle at 14.4. Still the same story I had before, even without showing the last ones, but you might as well see them. Okay, next slide. So that's all as of June 30, 2022, last valuation. What's happened since then? Well, as I mentioned before,
Can I ask a question? Sorry. Just in terms of the metrics, one of the things that we were thinking about as a metric in addition is the size of the contribution or the unfunded liability in relation to the entire budget. So in other words, you can be unfunded, but if it's a tiny percentage of your budget, it's less concerning than if you have the same unfunded liability or contribution that makes up a big percentage of your budget. So have you seen metrics that show?
There are metrics like that, taking the city's revenue. And so instead of taking contributions divided by city revenue that way. For most agencies throughout California, what we found is that their payroll is 80 to 90% of their budget. So it doesn't turn out much different. There are some exceptions, cities like Colma on the peninsula. That is, most of Colma is either cemeteries or malls. Not nearly as many people there.
So the metric that shows the pension payment as a percentage of pensionable payroll, you're saying is a pretty decent indicator.
It's pretty close for most agencies.
And the conclusion is we're kind of in the same boat as other folks in the same pool.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay.
So, other questions? Okay. So, again, what's happened since the last valuation? As I mentioned before, biggest thing that impacts valuation results are investment returns. Next slide. Last couple years, again, year ending June 30, 2022, one of the worst years in CalPERS investment history, one of the 5 worst years in CalPERS investment history. They announced a return of minus 6.1%. This is not just reflected on CalPERS. Every asset class in the year ending June 30, 2022 lost money. There was no place to hide it. Every major pension fund across the country lost money. Year ending June 30, 2023, they announced a return of 5.8%. Look at the next slide. You'll see the returns on a year-by-year basis for the last 40 years in the green bars. You'll notice very solid returns in the 80s and 90s, and a lot of volatility happening, beginning right around 2000. A couple of reasons for that. First of all, markets became a lot more volatile once the dot-com bubble burst. But the other thing is that bond yields had been coming down. From the time I started working in the pension area right around the early 80s, where they were around 10%, coming down gradually, it's staying at around 7 or 8% for a little while and throughout the 80s and 90s, and coming down again, moving lower, till they basically bottomed out February 2020, when the world shut down and the Fed just dropped interest rates to 0. Now, what that meant, CalPERS, back when I first started, had an asset allocation, 60% stock, 40% bonds. 40% in bonds was getting that return, 10%, 7%, 5%. So as their fixed income return went down, CalPERS did a couple of things. One is they made their asset allocation more aggressive. started going into more of it in stock, some in international stock, leveraging slightly, eventually going into private equity. They also lowered their assumed rate of return slightly. You'll notice the red line is their assumed rate of return. It looks level compared to the volatility of the market, but it actually has been coming down gradually over the last 30 years. It was 8.75% in the mid-90s. We got them to drop it to 8.25% and then down to 8 when I was the auditing actuary for CalPERS right around the turn of the century, which sounds so long ago. Back in 1800. And slowly they've been moving it down further and hitting its lowest point in many, many years at 6.8%, beginning with the June 30, 2021 actuarial valuation.
Could I ask just a quick question here? It's a sort of a 30,000-foot question. Is what percentage of the stock exchange is held by CalPERS? It's huge, isn't it?
Well, the stock exchange is huge, but CalPERS has $500 billion.
And how much of the whole is $500 billion?
It's enough that for CalPERS, when they buy regular stocks, basically public equity, they have to buy pretty much everything. So they're not exactly indexed, but they're pretty close to indexed on the public equity. Again, I don't know how big the full market is, but they are a significant part of the whole thing. If CalPERS decided to sell Tesla stock would drop even more than they just did today. So major impact on certain things. And one of the reasons why the Brown Act got an exception for things like investments, pension funds, so CalPERS doesn't have to announce to the world before they make a move like that and end out losing all the money because everybody else got there before.
Do you expect that CalPERS will be able to go to a less aggressive asset allocation now that bond yields have come back up? Or is it just a blip and we can't really count on that?
Okay. CalPERS doesn't always do what I think they're going to do. And that was true even when I was one of their advisors. Because interest rates have risen so dramatically over the last year and a half, normally CalPERS takes an intense look at their asset allocation every 4 years. They look at their assumptions every 4 years. They reset everything, and they're required to do that by law. Because of that big increase in a short time, CalPERS actually set up a meeting earlier to go over that. This past November, they met to talk about asset allocation. I was expecting them to do exactly that, to take a lot of risk off the table because they've been talking about wanting to take risk off the table and get an asset allocation that would still be able to hit the 6.8%, but be able to do it with less risk and less volatility. They took a little bit of risk off the table. What they did is they picked a new asset allocation that would probably get between 7 and 7.1%. Is their expectation for it by taking a little bit of risk off the table. They basically said, this is our intention, the committee that did that. They came back this past month, late last month, and I haven't had a chance to see their final decision, but they were going to finalize it at that point and make the move. At that point, they said that while they expect the asset allocation to return 7 or 7.1, they're not going to change their assumption from 6.8% because they've been working really hard to get it down from 8.75 to 6.8, and they don't want to have to just push it right back as soon as the Fed lowers interest rates. So that's where they were going. In the few months between last November and March, CalPERS board members have been receiving, people have been asking CalPERS to rethink that process of raising the assumption, potentially raising the assumption. The League of Cities, I think, said One was trying to influence them to move in that direction. Employee groups, because employee contributions are tied, for Pepper employees, tied to the assumptions. If they raise the assumptions a little, funded percentages will look better, and employee contributions will come down. I do not know what CalPERS actually decided, but since I did not hear that they announced a higher assumed rate of return, I assume that they decided to stay where they are for now and wait to see how long the Fed is going to keep interest rates where they are. If Jay Powell's comments today at Stanford are an indication, basically saying he thinks we're going to find out soon if this is the new neutral rate that can keep inflation coming down and the economy moving along. It'll keep interest rates where they are now, which is where they were before 2008, pretty consistently between 2000 and 2008 at about this level. It may be the neutral point, in which case in 2025, when they redo their assumptions, I would guess they're going to slide them back up. Because they worked so hard to bring them down, they're probably not going to push them back up anytime soon. But getting back to your initial question of taking risk off the table, I thought they would take more risk off the table. They haven't right now. Maybe they will at the next one when they see that the rates are going to stay where they are right now. But again, I don't think they were comfortable that the rates were going to stay at this level.
And the next meeting is in 25?
Is unless something extraordinary happens, probably in 2 years.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You had a question?
Yes. I've been taking a close look at your bar graph, and it's delightful to see because I haven't seen something like that. And I finally started to look at the below the line. And you have the dot-com crash that was a couple years, and there was a recovery of a year before it was strong again. We had the Great Recession, which was from the horrendous loans that were made and caused such distress financially. And then I see it, and that was in 2003, 2004, right? Or 2008 and 2009. And then we went down 6%, the return there, which was mostly COVID related?
Well, COVID was post-COVID to some extent, but it was very much the world trying to recover from COVID. It was the supply chain issues, which were hitting everywhere. It was finally people trying to come to work. It was a lot of things related to that, where all the markets ended up dropping down, and interest rates were being pushed back because inflation went up. I don't know if we want to call it COVID, we want to call it corporate greed. A lot of stuff was going on in 2022.
So what can we learn from that as we look towards the future and in trying to plan for or understand how we are, our unfunded pension liability is going to be affected by these factors like this that I guess we have no control over?
There are definitely things that are outside of all of our control. I don't know if any of you belong to the Illuminati, but if not, then the markets are just going to move as they move. What you can do is prepare, is plan, is run different scenarios out to see what would happen to you if market drops again in a couple years, or if CalPERS doesn't hit their targets. This is something we do with a lot of agencies to try and better understand where things are going. And what many agencies throughout California are doing is trying to build a cushion to get ahead of where it is so that when bad times come, because there is a strong correlation between down markets and lower city revenue, because if the economy is doing badly, it affects both. So the worst possible time for CalPERS to ask you for more money is when the economy is down, which is exactly when they're going to ask you for more money. That's one of the downsides of the actuarial methodology that's here right now. So, and we'll talk about that in a little while later in this presentation about some of the things you might be able to do.
What did cities or not do at the peaks? Did they just say, oh, this is great, we're going to just it's wonderful, isn't this wonderful, but we don't really have to
Well-
do something, adjust anything. We're just going to bask in this green.
A third provision to PEPRA, the Pension Reform Act, was that, so back in late 90s, almost every agency in CalPERS was over 100% funded. Most of them were over 150% funded. CalPERS created a new terminology, what they call super funded. Sounds fantastic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What happens, super funded is a condition where if investment returns match and all the assumptions experience matches assumptions moving on to the future, then no additional contributions need to go into the plan to pay for the benefits for any employee who's in the plan now or has been in the past. So there's enough money to cover everybody. And so when those conditions got hit, CalPERS stopped employer contributions, and agencies could opt to stop employee contributions. So when things were going well, when you had a lot of money, nobody put any money into the plan. So when it reversed, when the dot-com bubble burst, then you had less money, and CalPERS asked you for more, and it wasn't even in your budget for a while, so it was the hardest way to get it into the plan. So one of the things that CalPERS did with PEPRA is they said that even if you are over 100% funded now, your contribution will always be at least the normal cost. And again, that's reasonable. You know, if you get to 200% funded and there's extra money in there, then at that point we can start talking to CalPERS about legislative relief, but there really aren't agencies like that in California right now. So when agencies get above 100% funded, the economy is generally doing well, they'll keep putting something in, employee contributions will keep going into the plan, and this will hopefully build a cushion for the time when eventually the markets drop, because they always do. So a lot of this is people learn lessons the hard way. It took a while for them to fix it, but just as with the question you had with the overtime, eventually this California state legislature listens and does something about it. So again, there are plenty of other things that are going to go wrong between now and then. So they haven't solved everything, but those are things they've learned lessons from.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, and I just want to do a time check. We got,
I have 12 minutes to do all of this and all
OPEB.
the rest of it.
yes.
Okay, I'm not going to take any more breaths until this whole thing is done. Okay, actually, one of the things I do want to mention is that one of the areas that CalPERS put more money in was private equity. Private equity takes longer to value than public equity. These numbers are what CalPERS announces in July of each year before final valuations of private equity. These are the numbers that actually show up in your actual evaluation reports. These are not the numbers that get credited to your accounts. CalPERS gets the private equity numbers a few months later. They actually take that into account in the proper valuation. So in the year ending June 30, 2021, the 21.3 number here actually became a 22.4 that they credited to your account. Found $6 billion of extra money, and I don't know what you would do if you found $6 billion in your wallet. They told nobody, but they gave you credit for it. The next year, the minus 6.1 became a minus 7.5. So they basically had market for everybody, including private equity. This year, the 5.8 is going to become a 6.1. By the way, actually, this past year, June 30, 2023, as of March 31st, 2024, this fiscal year, CalPERS has already earned 7.2%, roughly. So they're already ahead of target. They've already beaten their target. If things continue like this for the rest of the year, it'll be a good year, and it's going to help things moving forward. If I talk about it too much, they'll hear me, and the markets will go back down. But again, they earned 6.1. Reminder on the next slide, less money from investment return means more money required from contributions. They didn't hit their target. 6.1 is better than nothing, but it's not 6.8. That difference means lower investment return means higher contributions required. Now, normally that's all I talk about in terms of what affects agencies. That's the biggest thing by far. It's 95% of the results. In the year ending June 30, 2022 and 2023, it wasn't the biggest thing impacting everything. The next biggest thing was inflation. And So on the next slide, we basically show that retirees get COLAs, and I talked about it being a maximum of 2%. The reality is that the COLA is a maximum of 2% compounded from the time somebody retires. So what that means is if the first year you retire, inflation's 1%, you get a 1% COLA. If the second year after you retire, inflation's 3%, you can get that 3% because you didn't use up the full 2% the first year. It's what CalPERS refers to as a COLA bank. I haven't had to talk about the COLA bank in 20 years. It's a good thing I haven't forgotten about it because it's finally back, inflation popping up. So what happened for people who retired in 2020, they got a cost of living adjustment in 2022 of the 2%. They didn't have a COLA bank. Those who retired in 2019, you can see here they got 2.77%. They had lower inflation the year before. Kept increasing. Everybody who retired between 2006 and 2014 had a significant COLA bank. They got the full 4.7% inflation as their cost of living adjustments. They kept up with inflation. That created a liability increase of somewhere between 1 and 1.5% of liabilities, very significant for agencies throughout California. So that's the second thing that popped up. In 2023, we saw something similar. Next slide. Inflation was 8%. Most of the people, most of the retirees between 2015 and 2021 who used up their COLA bank, you can see they're still getting a 2% COLA. In 2006 and 2014, they had a little bit of COLA bank left, so they got adjustments between 2 and 3.5% of the cost of living adjustment. Inflation was so high those last 2 years that a provision that hadn't kicked in since the late 80s kicked in, PPPA, the Purchasing Power Protection Act, which was basically set up in the 1980s because of the hyperinflation in the 70s. Retirees were losing purchasing power on their pensions. If inflation is 5% and you get a 2% COLA, you just lost 3% purchasing power. So the Purchasing Power Protection Act basically says if anybody loses more than 75% of their purchasing power from the time they retired, they will keep getting full inflation adjustments moving forward. And hadn't kicked in about 25 years. Kicked in right now for people who retired in 1988 and before, people who retired between 1965 and 1988. Not a lot of people there. Not very big pensions because they retired a long time ago when we weren't really using money. And so they got higher COLAs, so we got a liability over there. Also, you're in the risk pool. The average pay increase throughout California for this year, higher than the 2.8% CalPERS assumed across the board, probably between 5 and 6%. So the total liability loss is going to be, again, about 1.5% of liability for the next 2023 year. So how does that affect everything? Let's go to the next slide. Look how that impacts everything. Next slide after that. The green line here shows where things were projected to be based on the June 30, 2021 valuation. Your unfunded liability started about $25 million, was slowly going to be coming down and get fully paid off by about 2036. Because of the big investment loss and liability loss in 2022, your unfunded liability jumped from the green line up to the red line. And it's going to pop up a little higher to the purple line with the 2023 valuation when it comes out. So going up from being about 24 million to about 40 million. So we're talking there an increase of about 60% in unfunded liability. Now the green is in your valuations. That's the numbers that we showed you. You'll notice one of the other things that's here is the unfunded liability is going to stay relatively steady for the next few years before starting to come down. The reason for that is the contribution smoothing methodology that I sort of alluded to earlier, where when you have big investment losses, CalPERS doesn't charge you the full amount right away. They have what they call a ramp up. So the first year after that, they'll charge you 20% of the amortization cost. The next year is 40, then 60, then 80, then the full 100. So it'll slowly ramp up to get there. And because of that, in the first few years, you're not actually paying off all that loss. You basically have a negative amortization for that piece. The rest of the unfunded liability is getting paid down. It's getting pushed up. Basically levels off your unfunded liability for the next few years before you finally get to about 100% of that contribution, and then it starts coming down again. Funded percentage on the next screen, which is pretty much the same thing flipped around. You're going to get to 100% funded now, somewhere around 2041 instead of around 2036 because of that big loss. Contributions on the next slide show that ramp up. The green line is where we were looking to see contributions go based on the 2021 valuation. The red line and the purple line for the 2022 and the 2023 valuation. So significant increases coming over the next few years. Instead of making a contribution of about $4 million to about $4.5 million this year, and it was leveling off and coming down, you're going to see it ramp up to about $6.5 million over the next 7 years. So it's about a 35% increase over the next 6 years coming, unless this year's market return becomes significant and pushes it back down. Next slide basically shows the pieces of that. The orange here is the normal cost, the cost for each year of service as it's earned, relatively steady across time and consistent. The purple is your payment towards unfunded liability. You can see it stepping up over the next few years as they ramp up that piece. So most of your contribution right now, of the $6 million contribution, over $4 million of it is unfunded liability payments, or will be when 2030 comes around. So most of your payment is towards unfunded liability. Next slide. So what can you do? You should be thinking about addressing unfunded liability. Slide after that. The reason you want to do that again, because what we saw here is most of your contribution payments due to payments towards unfunded liability. Unfunded liability is basically a loan from CalPERS. And they're loaning you the money at their assumed rate of return, 6.8. So it's an expensive loan from CalPERS. If you start addressing it, if you pay off some of your unfunded liability, you're going to you'll lower contributions. Next slide shows it graphically. Less unfunded liability means less contributions. So what some agencies do, next slide, thinking about, again, we're not here, I didn't go through options because we've got 3 minutes to go through all the retiree health stuff, which is, again, similar to all this, but not the same. Agencies look at making additional contributions per way towards pension, either making one-time contributions. Maybe the city's going to buy Powerball tickets because it's big enough to pay off your unfunded liability right now. That would do it. But if not, looking to find extra money in the budget, whether it's because new revenue sources are coming in or you have a surplus or something's going on, taking some of that money, either budgeting it each year and trying to get ahead, or what some agencies do is wait till the end of the year, see if they have a budget surplus, and allocate some of that budget surplus towards pension. I know you have things that are more exciting to do in the city of Albany, but at some point the pension needs to be dealt with. In terms of doing that, there are questions as to then where you put that money. I think that's on the next slide. Oh, yeah, we'll skip this. We don't have time for this one. Skip to next one, skip to next one, and the one after. No, it's not there. In terms of where to put the money, some agencies give it directly to CalPERS. Others stick it in what's effectively a rainy day fund in a Section 115 trust. We're right now talking about the problem. We're not here. We want to basically give you an idea. Basically, I'm here to depress you about where things are. And on the pension side, then you can start thinking about solutions for later meetings. Very quickly for the retiree health, we can switch to that one. On the OPEB stands for other post-employment benefits. It's post-employment benefits other than pensions, because the accounting standards set up rules for pensions, and they had to set up other accounting standards later. Next slide, go to the one after. You're basically retiree health plans. So next slide. Where you are right now, your unfunded liability there, $4.8 million, not nearly as big as it is for the pension side. On the other hand, your funded percentage here, 0. Most agencies have treated their retiree health plans like health plans. And health plans, you just pay the premiums each month as they become available. You don't set money aside. What a number of agencies have started doing over the last decade or two is starting to treat them as retirement plans and set the money aside while people are working, have the money there while people are retired. Your benefit payments over the next year, the explicit benefit payments, the amount that are actually coming out of your city budget, projected to be $88,000. There is also something referred to as implicit benefit payments, implicit subsidies. What this refers to, as a general rule, older people are more expensive to cover in health care than younger people. I don't know if any of you have gotten older recently, but if you have, like, for my kids can do something stupid, and then they will heal. I see them do something stupid, and I have to go to the doctor. It hurts. Okay? We just use more health care than younger people do. Now, CalPERS charges the same health care premium for everybody without regard to age, all the way up to 65 when Medicare kicks in. So there is effectively a hidden subsidy for older people paid for by younger people, or by cities who have younger employees for older employees. That hidden subsidy, the accounting standards want you to take that into account. It's basically a bookkeeping amount. And that amount right now for the city of Albany for next year is $144,000.
Is that on top of the 88,000?
That's on top of the 88,000. Now, as we project, next slide, the discount rate that was used in the most recent valuation is based on, basically because you don't have any money set aside, is based on the projection of what you're going to earn in your internal trust, which is by the rules supposed to be based on, or by accounting rules, we use a 20-year high-quality government bond to measure that, to match up against that. That went up to 3.86%. Next slide. Your benefit payments, again, both the combination of explicit and implicit were about $220,000. You can see it's going to be gradually moving up over time. It's going to be moving up because more people, more retirees, healthcare costs are projected to increase.
I have a question going back to that discount rate. Why is that so much lower than the pension discount rate?
Because you don't have any money in it. So instead of, if you go to CalPERS on their discount rate uses 6.8% because they have a combination of stocks and bonds and other things, all of your money that's going to be used to pay this is all in short-term, high-quality government securities, low risk, no risk to some extent. So that's why it has to be measuring that as the measure of what's there. Now, I'm going to come back to that in just a few moments when I get to the question of you could pre-fund. Next slide. Your projected unfunded liability, assuming you don't, if you continue to just pay as you go, it's going to go up from right now 4.4 million. You can see it is going to keep increasing. You keep having new employees come in, they eventually become retirees. There's a huge liability. It's going to go up to 8, 12 million over the next 20, 30 years. And your funded percentage on the next slide, that one's really easy. It's 0 because you have no money. I just like showing this one. Next slide.
So sad.
Now, again, one thing you can think about as an option on this is to start to treat it like a retirement plan and start to pre-fund. If you do that and you start setting money aside and there's enough money to do something with it, you can start using the expected return on this fund as the discount rate, lowering the liabilities right away once you start putting, if you make a plan, start putting money in and follow that plan, you can start doing that moving forward. There's a lot of flexibility in this because unlike CalPERS, where CalPERS forces you to make minimum contributions, this is all done at the discretion of the city council. So you can start and stop as things get better and worse as long as you keep having enough money in there to go. Next slide. Showing, so the potential scenario, we assumed you'd make a contribution. What would happen if you made a contribution like CalPERS does, actually determine a combination of normal cost plus amortization of unfunded liability. Next slide. What you would see, the contributions initially would be higher. Instead of being that green line, we'd have to hop up to the red line, basically doubling what they are in the short term. It would continue like that for about 15 years till you've covered your unfunded liability and then start coming down. Then you would have savings moving forward. Next slide. Unfunded liability, take a drop right away because you can use a discount rate. We use 6% for this purpose, so it wasn't quite as aggressive as CalPERS. And so liability comes down and continues to go down. You'll get to 100% funded in 2041, similar to when you're going to hit 100% funded for CalPERS. So your books would be much better. The other thing that will do is if you have to go out for, to issue bonds for capital improvements or other things, they look at your funding on your pension, your funding on your OPEB to issue your bond rating. So for a lot of agencies, it can help improve your bond rating, can get you a slightly lower interest rate on capital projects. Is that the last slide? I think it is. Oh, funded percentage, yeah. Instead of being 0, it goes up to 100, and everybody's happy. So I think that's it. That's the last slide? That's the last slide. So this one was much quicker. It's a lot easier to deal with the financial issue when you have no money.
Is there an option to fund something in between the
Yes,
plus
it
144?
is absolutely your discretion. What some agencies do, especially in the beginning, what a lot of agencies do is they say, we can't double it right away. We don't have room in the budget. But taking small steps to start doing it. You think about it like training for a marathon. You don't just go out the first day and train for a marathon. You start walking the first day and maybe jogging a mile and walking and jogging, and eventually you're going to be running the whole thing. Little steps. So if you can make your regular contributions and maybe stick $50,000 aside the first year, $100,000 aside the next, slowly taking steps to start building up something on top of it, that's going to make a lot of progress. And in fact, if the city has, if you knew you had, for just picking a number, $500,000 sitting out there, and you want to know where the best place to put that $500,000 might be, is it the pension plan? Is it the OPA? Is it the retiree health plan? Is it to a pension 115 trust? Again, we would look at this in detail, but my guess is for a plan like yours, the biggest bang for your buck initially is to start funding the retiree health plan. You'll get a big, because the combination of the raising the discount rate lowers the liability, plus starting to put money in there, that usually gives a bigger bang for your buck than putting in CalPERS, even if CalPERS is going to earn more money at a 6.8 return versus the 6% return that you have. And I've gone over my time, and I know that was very important to you, so I apologize for that.
No,
Oh, it's worth every
Worth it.
minute.
yeah, very good presentation. There more questions?
Just a real quick, and I don't want to take us too much over, but thank you for your presentation. It was very good and very insightful. But I think there's a couple underlying assumptions that are part of your presentation that I want to kind of highlight a little bit. And the first one that comes to mind is that you're assuming that the benefit level doesn't change over time, that we continue to fund retirement benefits as we have in the past. True, false?
Yes, we absolutely did the same benefit levels that are in place now. Now, for example, with CalPERS, with everybody, with the new people coming into the PEPRA level, we take that into account.
Right, so there's been one change historically, and that's called PEPRA.
Yeah.
There are no anticipated changes going forward called PEPRA 2, as far as we know.
Right. I'm not taking, I am not.
None of that is in this scenario at all. So we're okay.
Not taking into account benefit increases or decreases. Historically, what has tended to happen, and we're seeing a lot of it in other states that did pension reform right around 2008 when the Great Recession hit. They created new benefit tiers. Those employees are now getting close to retirement. They want to have the same benefit tiers that the other people who they've been working next to for their entire career have. They're pushing to bring them back up, and while the economy is well, they're pushing them back up. There has not been that push in California yet, but that's been happening more in other states. That's been going on and has historically.
And in other industries, because I speak from personal experience with the California Nurses Association, where I was at the point where the CalPERS adjustment, using the metaphor, happened. So it is possible that those changes could affect the overall position of the city in relation to our unfunded liability.
It absolutely could.
Okay.
But you're saying in some other states, there's actually a push to increase pension benefits?
Increased pension benefits. Let me try and remember which states are going on right now. Florida just did something like this. They just they're talking about putting the COLA back, the cost of living for retirees that they took away, and moving people back up. State of Connecticut is going through something similar right now, and I think even New York has some changes like that.
Are they in a better funded situation than California in general?
I don't think so.
So, okay.
So this, I think what's going on is we have hit an era of union empowerment that we have not seen in a long time. 2023 was the year of the strike. There were more strikes in 2023 than in any year in the last 40. And the strikes worked out relatively well. There's very, very low unemployment that's continuing on, so employees feel like they're not risking their jobs by asking for more at this point. And the agencies are having trouble filling vacant positions. So this is some of the back things that are impacting all of this. And so it's, yeah, and I don't know where they're going to pay for it, and this was something that, a warning that I gave in 1998 and 99 when California went to bump benefits up is, yeah, somebody's got to pay for it at some point, and they should be thinking about that.
I have a
Thank you. Yeah.
question. So I think it was last year, at least a year ago, this committee had a motion to take I think it was 1.2 million surplus and spend, and have the council use that to pay down the unfunded pension liability. Instead, there was a proposal by the administration to use that money to fund certain accounts that they felt they needed to fund. They weren't actually going to spend it, they were just going to fund an account. It was like a savings account. And I made a statement, if I recall correctly, that if we paid the $1 million down, we would get a $70,000, in a sense, return on our investment. And that $70,000 would be compounded, every year, because that's less that we owed. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Maybe they spent $500,000. Cassie, do you recall that they actually paid down any of it?
The city set aside $775,000 in a pension reserve, a set aside essentially for pension. No decision has been made exactly what to do with that money. It's just sitting in a designation for pension stuff. And so the rest of the money did go into capital reserves, which is what you're thinking of, the balance of the recommendation. But the 775 is still sitting there as a reserve for pension and could be used for some purpose related to this.
So it wasn't actually paid down?
No,
And
there
what
wasn't.
did it bring back any return on that? So it went to a savings account somewhere,
It's sitting in our investment account.
which earns approximately what?
Benchmark
Probably
is,
about 3.
no, our
It's a
benchmark's
little higher.
I want to say
Close to 5, I think.
5, I think 5.
Okay.
I've got a question. So watching this over the last few years, we hit the discount rate, we don't hit the discount rate. UAL goes up, it goes down. I'm feeling whiplash kind of, by the enormity of these numbers and how much they're going up and down every year. And you said that the current year that'll be ending soon, they're ahead of target. Is GovInvest doing projections for us about, well, what if they do hit a 7.3% return? How much will that drop our UAL?
Our software is designed to actually do things exactly like that. So the next step that we're going to work with your staff on, depending on what you tell them to do, is probably to look at things like where the costs are going with the asset returns. And again, I don't like counting good returns until I really see them. But also trying to figure out what's the best thing to do with that $775,000 that's sitting in a reserve right now. I mean, the good news is because the Fed raised interest rates, you're getting 5% on it instead of close to nothing, which is great. On the other hand, in hindsight, we now know that if you'd given it to CalPERS, they would have earned 7.2 already with it, and maybe a little bit more. But we can't guarantee that's going to happen in the future.
Or they could have lost 6.3 like they did the year before.
Absolutely. And if I had put the money in, they would have lost 6.3. So it's, you want to take you want to look at the different options, look at the combination of things that save you the most, that look to save you a lot of money over time, that give you the biggest impact to your budget in the short term, and continue to give you the most budget flexibility moving forward. So what we'll probably do is come back to a later meeting with the options and talk about those at the different options and which ones give you the biggest benefits in each of those categories.
I thought your comments on the OPEB unfunded liability were really illuminating to me, because to me, that's sort of this sleeper debt that's lingering out there, and it's not really on our radar yet, or it wasn't on mine. And so the comment about, if you can get your discount rate to 6% from 3.8% by starting to just set that money aside, maybe we're better off focusing on that and making sure we don't end up with a $20 million liability in 2041 on that plan.
And I think too, just to kind of move us through the end of this, we are planning to come back and talk to the committee and the council about a pension and OPEB funding policy. So what would the prioritization be for funding? And we are using the GovInvest software to model potential scenarios for a variety of things, including, making additional discretionary payments, et cetera, but also the fact that there are other things we know, like as Ira mentioned, the fact that salaries are going up statewide quite a bit. That means that that's going to have an impact as well. So, we're watching the market go, and then we're watching salaries go up, and so, there's a lot of moving parts to that, and that's part of why we want to come back with a pension and OPEB funding policy, so that we can kind of put some framework together, so that then we're not yanked quite so dramatically every time one of those moving parts moves. Mm-hmm. It's very whiplashy for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And with that, thank you. Thank you very much.
you
And
so
we look
much for
forward
your
to
time.
seeing you in the future. Do we take public comment now on this? Yes. Any public comment?
I thought I saw someone had their hand raised on the online thing a while ago.
I think it was to make a comment that got answered subsequently, because then they put their hand down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was well worth it. So let's move on to item 5.2, the property tax revenues.
Could you put the tax bill on the screen, please? Okay. My attempt today is to educate us and the public about what's in their tax bill. And is part of my research on this, I asked multiple of my friends and fellow property owners, did they know what was in it? And basically, the answer was, well, I get it, and I know I have to pay it twice a year, and I make sure I pay it on time, and that's about the extent of their knowledge. And if I dug deeper into what this bond is or this special assessment is, they didn't know. So I'm trying to make this kind of simple, and so that everyone can kind of understand what's in their tax bill. First thing we need to talk about is Prop 13. In 1978, we passed, California passed Prop 13 that limited the assessed value of property to what it sells for plus 2% a year. And that each year it can only go up 2% or 1% during a recession. Property owners may apply for a reduction in assessed value if there is a drop in below market value, as during the recession. That happened a few times. So what is the assessed value? The assessed value is something that is set by the county assessor's office, okay? And each property has their assessed value, and the county will charge per year 1% of that assessed value and that goes to the Alameda County, and that will help pay for their $4.1 billion budget. That's how it gets, one of the main ways it gets paid. 0.3766% goes to the city of Albany for various voter-approved debt service. Our city budget is approximately $25 million. So there are certain bonds and charges that are called ad valorem taxes, which ad valorem is Latin for as per the value. So the value of the assessed value. So there's a county general obligation bond, that's the GO bond. There is the City of Albany bond, which I think goes to pay for the new construction of the building that we're in. When we build things for the city, we have to borrow money for the construction, and then there's a bond that's issued to pay for that, and over time we pay it off. There's a school unified bond. There is a school community college bond. There is a Bay Area rapid transit bond, which is for BART, I believe. Then there's an East Bay Regional Park District bond that excuse me, did I cover it all? I did, okay. Now, there is some land that's owned by the University of California that is part of which we all know as the Target Complex and the Belmont Village senior housing. That property is UC-owned land, but as part of the taxes, it is called not on the secured property tax roll, which is secured is our homes and businesses and real estate. It's called something called the unsecurity property tax roll. And business use of this land that was previously exempt is now subject to some taxes, but not all. And there's an unusual word that I've learned and for the first time is called the possessory interest can be charged ad valorem taxes, but that doesn't include the land value. So those businesses do pay the ad valorem taxes, and you'll see that when we get to the spreadsheet. The next set of taxes are on the right side. We have the city landscape tax, and this is a fixed rate, okay? So it doesn't change over the years. The taxes that we just saw were change in cost by 2% a year, usually, or when a property sells and gets reevaluated, reassessed on that new valuation. And we'll see that in the spreadsheet, how dramatically that can happen by an example that I've shown on the spreadsheet. So we have the city landscape special charge. That's for helping the city provide landscaping. There's a mosquito MSRK, that's for mosquito abatement. There is the CSA paramedic, which helps pay for our emergency ambulance. VEC control is vector control, MSR A84. That's for, again, for mosquitoes. There's a lot of these get voted and added on separately, but they go for similar things. The ALS Measure N is for, the ALS stands for Advanced Life Support, and that's done by paramedics in the fire department. And there's another paramedic supplement that goes towards that kind of emergency paramedic service. Street and storm drains, that's, the city gets that to help pay for our sewers. There's a library supplement that helps pay for the library. The Albany Sidewalk Tax helps pay for the repairs to the sidewalks. This was a more recent tax that we voted through in the last few years. You get down to one of the more significant ones, which is Albany USD, Unified School District, Measure B, which has exemptions for seniors and people on SSDI and SSI. Presently, $490 is paid by a 745 square foot one-bedroom condo, which is the same as Golden Gate Fields, which has 330,000 square feet. This will be changing, and was been replaced by Measure G, just approved, which will charge 55 cents per square foot. This charge will not be charged towards Belmont Senior Living, which is 172,000 square feet of area, or Sprouts Complex, because those properties, I've been told when I talked to the assessor's office this week, are exempt from the fixed charges. I'm not sure why that can't be remedied, but there may be a way where the city can create a special tax through a bond, through a proposition or a measure that could assess certain special charges that are equivalent to what we pay. All right, that is the tax bill. Is there any questions on the tax bill?
I have a quick question. Each of those are either a fixed amount per residential or commercial, or like assessed via square footage? I'm looking at.
There's some that.
It's 43,000. I assume that's by square footage.
Well, you'll see when we get to the spreadsheet how it changes, but all of the ad valorem is based on assessed value, and these for each year stays the same. So the bill that you see now for, I believe this is for Target, will also be for them the next year. That doesn't change over time. Okay? Any other questions?
Yeah, so like Measure J, which is the huge number on here, I assume that differs in some way for a residential property.
Let me see, am I
It
confused?
might show up when you do the comparison.
No, it's Measure B that's being replaced by Measure G that we just voted. Measure J is going to stay the same, I believe.
But
That hasn't been.
residential property is not paying 43,000. I assume it's based off of
Yeah,
square
there
footage
is.
or like a fixed rate.
That's right. Okay. Can we bring up the spreadsheet now, please? Okay, so I put together this spreadsheet, which has 9 different property types, okay? We start with a 1-bedroom, then I have a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home that is, the 1-bedroom is 745 square feet. The 4-bedroom, 2-bath home, this comes from an actual tax bill. And it has a lot size of 6,768 square feet. Really good sized lot. Its value, assessed value last year was $194,722. Okay? That property was on the market last year, and it sold for $1.9 million. I wanted to put these side by side to show an example of how properties that have benefited from the Prop 13 that limited the assessed value to what they paid for it. In this case, it might have been in 1960 or 1970, and it only went up 2% a year, while their market value went up quite a lot. So this valuation is changing now, and it will change. The old bill had $194,000 on it. From the day of the close of escrow, the county will come back and bill what's called a supplemental tax bill. And every property purchaser is given this warning very clearly by both the real estate community and by the escrow companies. Say, look, this is all you're paying here at the close of escrow, okay? Here's the bill, but you're going to get a new bill, and it might take up to a year, and you'll have two segments, payments that you can catch yourself up on, and then by the following year, it will be at this new rate. So I did those two next to each other. Then I did a 12-unit apartment building. I did Safeway. The 12-unit apartment building was 13,000 square feet. Safeway was 23,000 square feet and has an assessed value of $11 million. Target has a valuation of $36 million, and it is 162,000 square feet. Golden Gate Fields has a valuation of, what is it here, $57 million, and it's 333,000 square feet. I'm hoping that that square footage will be applied towards this new measure that we voted for, so that, because if you go down and look across the board here, there's $490 that everyone has been paying for that special charge.
At the school district?
To the school district,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So that's what so some of these items get paid to the city, some to the county, some to the schools, some to the transit districts, all in different ways, and the city for the sewers, okay? Now, if we move all the way to the right, we're going to see that the Sprouts Shopping Complex, which, as I was trying to explain, is built on tax-exempt university land, has a building area of 44,000 square feet, and the lot size is 138,000. Their valuation is $29 million, which is actually very close to what, and it's actually above, this complex was for sale last year for $23 million. So they're actually paying, it appears to me, according to a figure that I received from the county assessor this week, that they appear to be paying on an evaluation that is above their actual value. market value, and they're paying $294,000 to the county. Okay, they're paying a total of $405,000 if I did my calculations correctly, okay? Then the Belmont Village is valued at $28 million, okay? And they're paying all of those taxes. But if we scroll down, we're going to see that all of the fixed charges and special assessments, they're not paying for those. And that's one of my concerns is this Albany Measure B that's going to be replaced by the one that we just voted for. That's going to, they'll still be exempt from that. And I'm not sure if there's a remedy that we can find through a special measurement that, tax measure that we can put on the ballot to remedy that situation so that like they can pay what I consider maybe their fair share towards the schools and other library and the library and open space at East Bay Mud. And now I want to clarify that all of the housing at UC that has existed for decades and the new housing does not pay this tax because I believe it's because of it's still for educational use because they're like dorms. They're only allowed to stay there while they go to school. The university does collect rent for that, but I believe that they're all exempt. We were told from last meeting that the city and the university has come to an agreement to pay $200,000 a year for 5 years to help pay for police and fire. Does that sound right?
There are two payments that come out of the MOU that the city has with UC. One is $200,000 a year for 10 years toward additional fire equipment to deal with the higher sized buildings. The other is a $400,000 a year that goes into the city's general fund for sort of all city services associated with that. So there are those two components. One is segregated for fire equipment. One is a general fund contribution. And both of those are subject to that 10-year MOU that the city has with UC Berkeley.
And does that apply to the new construction, or did that also to include the existing residences?
It is the sum total of that agreement with UC Berkeley. I'm not sure, what all went into the decision-making, but it is intended to be those two flat amounts for the 10-year period that's covered by the agreement.
So it's $600,000 a year, basically.
The 200 is segregated for equipment.
Yeah, but it's going into to the use by the city. So it's a kind of it's an in lieu of tax payment.
It's just a payment.
It's just a payment.
Oh, okay. That's what I'm calling it, in lieu of a tax payment. They're making that. In lieu of taxes, they're making this payment as to mitigate the services that the city is required to render to the citizens who live there. Because they use the schools, they use the BART, they use AC Transit, they use the library, they use all those services that everyone else is paying for.
So I know you got more, but I just want to do a time check.
Yeah.
This is super valuable, and I just want to pause and see if there are questions first before we go. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any, I will put myself in the camp of someone who had no idea what was going with their property tax bill, so thank you so much.
Oh, good, that's
for the
music to my
education.
ears.
I just had a quick question about the valuations of the different properties.
Yeah.
I mean, I think valuations are dependent on the year sold. So in other words, if we go up to the top, you scroll up, Cassie, up to the top, and look at the, I think you said 9 different properties, are they all valued at the same year? So, for example, the 12-unit apartment building last sold at what year? Or the Safeway was last valued and Target was last valued? I'm just curious if you have that
Yeah,
information.
so with the 12-unit apartment building, I found in the multiple listing service, a listing and a sale for 4.5 million. I don't know why. It says, I pulled up their tax bill,
Same address as the one you
same address, and unless it has to do with the fact that this is, again, the old tax bill. And I thought I'd pulled up the most recent one, but I will double check on that one. But this one was purchased and transferred just recently, the 12-unit one. Safeway is based on, I believe, the evaluation from when it was built. And then it's, so when something is built, like Target, they put in building permits and there's an evaluation on your permit. And when if you have a single-family home and you want to put on a $200,000 a major addition on your house, and you take out a permit for that, whether it's $200,000 or it's $50,000 for a bathroom, that whole process with the permits will trigger a disclosure to the assessor's office, which will notify you and say, I've helped a friend go through this. How much of this is completed? When did it get completed? And then they will adjust your assessed value based on the valuation of that building permit.
And I just don't know anything about the reappraisal of commercial properties. If Target moves the socks and underwear section, does that trigger a reappraisal of Target?
No, it has to be sold.
It has to be sold.
I don't think it is, but you've asked a great question that we should go to Golden Gate Fields. Okay? So let's look at Golden Gate Fields. If we can, that's all in red. And I put it all in red because since Golden Gate Fields is planning on closing, I have heard, I don't know if it's a rumor or what, that the university that UC was interested in purchasing that property. And if they purchased the property and used it for research or whatever, that would not be commercial, then all of those numbers would go away or could potentially go away. That go towards what gets paid, the 700 and just for these just taxes. That's not, so Golden Gate Fields also pays sales tax. It pays a tax on the betting. There's other revenue that commercials, like Target. Target's paying a sales tax to both the county and to us, okay? This is just the real estate tax that we're referring to. And I put it in red so that people could see a number that could potentially go away. Just so it's in our minds as we discuss and as the public hears about different proposals. I want them to see that there is a potentially negative to any positive that could happen from any development there. Okay? Yeah.
If the university bought it, would it be then reassessed at the new sales price and taxed at the ad valorem rate?
Okay.
Exclude
question.
all the other
Okay.
assessments?
No, let me tell you, so are you aware of the waterfront? There's an area when you go down there, there's this elevated area on the north side called the Plateau, where the owl habitat is.
The bulb?
Before the bulb, it's just across from the parking lot, there is this, the bulb is the area past the neck. So there's the plateau, which is closest to town. Then there's this narrow area called the neck that goes out to the bulb. People often refer to the whole thing as the bulb, but the bulb refers to the bulbous end of the neck, which was the landfill. Well, the plateau was previously owned by Golden Gate Fields and was sold to East Bay Regional Park District as public lands. The parcel taxes and the ad valorem taxes that went along with that property that Golden Gate Fields was paying went away. I pulled up the tax bill for that area, and it says 0, okay? So your question was if they, I think it has a lot to do what the use would be, what UC would use it for. And I don't think UC would be purchasing it to do a commercial venture on it. They'd be doing it for a educational purpose. And any future transformation of Golden Gate Fields to a mix of uses and recreation versus or housing or whatever, and then setting aside certain acreage for open space would trigger could trigger a loss of tax revenue, just like the plateau triggered a loss of revenue to the city, all right?
So
Yeah.
we're running pretty late.
Okay, I got one last thing to go through.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, I want people, Golden Gate Fields was acquired by Ladbroke in 1989, okay? And then it was taken over, and I use the phrase acquired by Ladbroke. I don't know what that means. Actually, I didn't see any sales. Then it was taken over by Magna Entertainment in 1999. And it's held under the Golden Gate Land Holdings LLC, okay? They pay taxes. But when we look at the evaluation, it says, let me get this right, $57 million, which is the assessed value, even though it's been, ownership has transferred at least twice since I've been around town, okay? A loan I found on one of my property records search through the multiple listing service, it said a loan was taken out on the property for $125 million in 2008. You only get a loan on a property based on its value. Banks don't lend money over and above anymore, over and above the value of a property. And with commercial properties, they tend to lend 50 to 60% of the value because it's commercial. It's not residential. Residential, you can get a loan up to 80, 90, 95, 97% even under certain conditions. So a question I want us all to think about is how did this transfer of ownership, did it or did it not trigger a reassessment? And what I have heard just from general conversations about this was that there was a stock swap, that the corporation that owned the Golden Gate Fields, that was Ladbroke, was taken over, literally, in a stock deal that where money changed hands and value changed hands, but it didn't trigger a reassessment. And that's, I think, deserves further scrutiny so we understand.
Yeah, so,
If If I could just add one quick thing on that.
Yeah.
The way that commercial property is handled under Prop 13 is vastly different than how residential property is handled. And so what triggers a reassessment is very much more complex than it is on residential. And there was a measure on the ballot in 2020 that would have forced an every 3-year reassessment. It failed, and so we don't have that. But yeah, commercial property has a good benefit going with the post-Prop 13 era.
Right. Well, first of all, thank you. That was a lot of research and really good information. So
Welcome.
for me, and I think
I learned a lot too.
Yeah, no, but
I only
that
had
was a
this
lot of
kind of
work.
general stuff.
that was a lot of work. Yeah. So I mean, just to kind of summarize some things that I got of it. So one is, in terms of UC, it would be really, and obviously, there's rules and there's rules, right? I mean, there's rules for what happened with Sprouts and Belmont Village, but then there was an MOU kind of saying, well, but, you know, we need some extra money for the extra services or whatever. And I guess one of the questions you raised, which I think is a good one, is in terms of UC Village, is the city, you don't have to answer this now, but is the city looking into, as they're doing this massive construction at UC Village, in terms of a different MOU or an additional MOU for the additional services that would be needed? So not to be answered now, but I think that's an issue that you flagged, and I think that's And then the other one is regarding commercial tax, and maybe there's nothing to say about that, but it would be interesting to hear about how commercial how commercial works. Are there any other questions or comments?
I just had one observation based on the research that you did, and it's always struck me over the years when I glance over the property tax bill, and like, gee, these special assessments are a lot of the bill. And I just calculated it off of the Target example that you provided, and 28% of Target's bill is the special assessments and parcel taxes and things like that. So the fact that UC doesn't pay any of those things on any of their own lands means a pretty significant loss of revenues to the city
And county.
and county.
Right.
And school district.
And just to add a finer point on that, the final disposition of Golden Gate Fields, when and if it closes, is going to be crucial to the financial health of the city. And so,
And there will be a lot of pressure to make it, open public land. I know there's a lot of sentiment, community desire for that to happen, but that, of course, would really hurt the city tax revenue if we do that.
I realize I misspoke. The MOU I was thinking about was if Golden Gate Fields became UC land, not UC Village, obviously.
And so MOU, I say this because I even used too many acronyms here, is Memorandum of Understanding. We may know it, but the public doesn't know what an MOU is. It's just an agreement by memoranda between two parties.
Well, thank you very much. That was good education.
Thank you.
So we have a few more agenda items. Oh, sorry, public comment. Any public comment? Online public comment? Yes, please.
Hi there, you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, it's Amy, through the alleyway and across the street. Interesting that AC Transit and Peralta and some of those other county-run organizations only basically get the same amount of money from us or from an apartment, someone who owns a giant apartment building or Target or Golden Gate Fields. That's kind of opportunity lost for them, it looks like. Sorry that, that'd be nice if that could change. And it's good to know, I never had known that about the MOUs, MOUSE, that you guys had with the university for the $2 million for the fire equipment and the $4 million for the general fund over 10 years. And that's important because people always talk about them not paying taxes, and we never realized that. I don't think most residents realize that. And if the university does buy the Golden Gate Fields property, please make sure you advise the city to make a similar and better deal, because that is such a large percentage of our revenue, and we need the money to run. So make sure the city runs a hard bargain on that, so we're not left with nothing. Thanks for doing all this research. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Nope. Okay.
Can I do a follow-on question to that? What degree of variance authority does the city have over such a sale? Golden Gate Fields is the owner of that property. They could presumably sell it to anybody they want. Do we have any say in that?
Nope. Anything else you'd like to
Nope.
know about that?
Nope.
Heck no.
But
That's too bad.
obviously the city had enough leverage to negotiate an MOU with UC regarding the village, regarding UC Village, right? So there's some leverage somewhere, even if it's not over the sale itself, I would think.
Potentially. I mean, there's potential political pressure, there's, the desire to have goodwill. I mean, there's any number of things that could play into it, but in terms of just sort of pure ability to affect who Golden Gate Field sells to, for example, not really.
As long as it's zoned.
No,
Oh, you can sell it and zone it later.
no, so I'd like to give input on that, because I personally went through the, in many different segments of it, the attempt by one group to build a complex out on Golden Gate Fields when they were willing to sell it to this developer, Rick Caruso, for a major development. Any change in the use of zoning down there would require a vote by the city to approve that change. Now, the existing zoning is for sports and it's only sports and recreation, I think it is. So you can't buy it and do anything but that on the site without, is it Measure E? I think it's Measure E. Measure E is something that the city residents voted on maybe 20 years ago that said any use, change in zoning has to go through the voters, and the city council can't just say, okay, we approve the zoning change, or the planning commission can't do it. They literally can't do it. Our Measure E forbids that. So, but UC and the state is exempt from Measure E, my understanding. So they can, just like they were able, so when UC was developing the Sprouts area and Belmont, they went through an application process with the city. They didn't have to, but they weren't going to cram things down the throat of the city because they were smart. And so there was this large process, negotiation that went on as to everything from parking and pathways and bike paths and pedestrian open space, things like that, that was all negotiated through a planning process that was reciprocal but my understanding, voluntary on the basis of the university.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for that clarification. Okay, so we're pushing at 9 o'clock, so I think I need to ask if folks are available to stay an extra, let's say, 15 minutes. I think we can get through the rest of the agenda in 15 minutes. Okay,
Moved.
second.
I'll second.
Okay.
It's not.
Yeah, so we don't have to do that, yeah, until we
Until it's after
start, yeah, we start a new topic at 9:30. So I will go quickly, right? I believe we're at my,
Is there any public? Oh, no, did we already
We
do
did.
public comment on the property tax? Okay,
okay.
yes, we did.
Yes, sugar sweetened beverages, briefly, just to kind of open it up for committee discussion. We included a staff report. Attached was the original ordinance, as well as the expenditure plan from the prior year. Then just kind of a quick overview of the staff report. The sugar sweetened beverage tax was passed November 2016 as a general tax. It is a 1 cent per fluid ounce tax on beverages that are sugar sweetened. Part of the passage included a requirement for City Council to hold a special annual study session to receive input on recommendations on the expenditure plan for proceeds of the tax. That study session is taking place on April 15th. Again, fiscal year '24 expenditure was attached and is here. That was discussed at last year's study session. To date, $130,000 of SSB tax proceeds have been spent in fiscal year '24. The primary cost in this fiscal year was for the crossing guard program, and that does align with the plan that was laid out. Current revenues for the fiscal year are $129,760. And last year, a Financial Advisory Committee did make a recommendation to City Council in allocating only what is budgeted as revenue in any given year, especially when a deficit is projected. So just the brief overview of this topic, and turn it over to you.
I guess off the top of my head, I like last year's recommendation, and I would also add not just the deficit, but that the kind of financial uncertainty that that member Kerr mentioned in terms of what's going to happen with Golden Gate Fields and the pension presentation, which was pretty sobering in terms of just the change in the financial position between 21 and 22, I think are further warrant that recommendation. Any other questions, comments? Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
I'm not sure this is the place for this to come up as a topic. Can you hear me? I'm not sure this is the place to bring this up, but recently I was reading some of the medical literature related to sugar sweetened beverages, and I was on the committee that got this bill passed. And it appears that boba drinks, which we sell in Albany in some quantity, now meet the nutritional standards nationally for being qualified as a sugar sweetened beverage. So I don't know how we would incorporate that into our current revenue stream, but it might be interesting to think about, because if per ounce we're charging for sodas, we might also be charging per ounce for boba drinks. So again, I'm not sure this is the right forum to bring that forward, but I just did.
Would that be something that the city attorney would look into, or? Yeah, okay. Do we need to vote on that recommendation, or is that just, yeah? And public comment, yes, sorry, thank you. Yes, please. Public comment online?
Amy, you're back on.
Great. So proceeds from the sugar sweetened beverage tax are earmarked specifically for projects that directly, in all caps, improve the health and wellness of Albany residents and visitor. Therefore, most of the items that have been funded or proposed in the past, like the water bottle filling stations and crossing guards so kids can safely walk to school, and bike racks or lockers, and rapid flashing beacon lights to help people cross highly trafficked roads, bike safety classes, classes for people to learn how to move and swim and live a more healthy lifestyle and eat healthy and cook healthy, healthy nutrition, all that stuff fits the bill. because those are examples of long-lasting projects which will help people live healthy lives and create long-term healthy habits. And those are some of the projects which are appropriate expenditures fitting the purpose and the spirit of the sugar sweetened beverage tax. However, single-day entertainment events are not an appropriate use of this money. Spending sugar sweetened beverage proceeds on music or entertainment won't have a lasting impact on anyone's health and is therefore an inappropriate use of those funds. So as the Financial Advisory Committee, you're entrusted to advise City Council, which you always do very well, what may or may not be appropriate uses of various funding sources. So please remind them that the limited sugar sweetened beverage tax proceeds that we have are earmarked to benefit public health and wellness, and as such, they must critically evaluate what's brought before them and ensure that this money goes directly to projects which benefit public health and wellness, creating long-term healthy habits and skills, not to entertainment or other ancillary unrelated projects. Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll just clarify, the measure was passed as a general tax. It is deposited directly into the general fund, and there is no preclusion on using it for any valid general fund purpose. It does contain language that is aspirational, that the goal is to have programs such as those that are listed here, perhaps with the exception of that one event that the speaker was speaking about. But it is entirely at the council's discretion how they spend those funds, and the goals are laid out, but it is not a rigid format.
Thank you. Okay.
So am I reading this right, that the fiscal '23 revenue is expected to be $295,207 per the report, the staff report, and the budget is $281,890, so the budget's about 14,000 under.
The budget for '24, which is this fiscal year, is $260,000 anticipated revenue.
Okay.
The council allocated a total of $281,890 in SSB revenue, which is in excess of what we anticipate taking in this year. I believe the FAC also said don't spend more than you take in on these special purposes if you're going to do the special purposes for it. There's a mismatch, but the two amounts are $260 in anticipated revenue, $282 in programmed expenditures. I do believe last year that the committee did also say don't program more than is coming in. One, know that it's a general tax. Two, be aware of other financial storm clouds on the horizon. And three, don't spend more than you anticipate taking in, and don't carry forward prior year unspent SSB amounts toward only SSB programs.
Right.
Because it's just a general fund tax. And I will tell you that even if they didn't spend all that programmed money, that rest of the SSB money, it's all spent in the budget.
Right.
It's 100% spent,
Yeah.
regardless of whether that particular program hits those particular dollar amounts. So
Where did you see the 260? I was trying to find that, but couldn't find it anywhere.
it should be listed in the staff report. The 295 is the actual that was received in fiscal year 23 when we closed the books. The 260 is what was in the budget for FY24. It may not be listed here. I just happen to know that because I've been staring at all of these numbers a lot. And so the 260 is what was anticipated and what I think was in contrast to the 281 last year.
And then, did we already have 2025 budgeted too? Because
I think it's also budgeted at 260. I don't know that we increased it. It may be budgeted at 270.
Okay.
And we think the event the speaker was referring to was the Move and Groove event. No one can definitively answer that, but that was my assumption. I just state that it does look like it involves a lot of physical activity from my
Yeah.
point of view.
I agree. I think that's, to my mind, that would qualify, but it doesn't, it still doesn't solve the problem that the planned expenditures exceed the revenue. So we just sort of dig ourselves a little bit deeper hole by collecting this tax and then spending more than the tax.
I go back to the motion that Mark, I think you made to make the same recommendation
Right.
again.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I saw that there was the raised hand. Is there an additional public comment, or is that? That's, okay.
You've closed public
One and
comment
done.
essentially,
Okay.
so.
One and done, okay.
Okay.
Can we vote? So how does this work? Did you record it, or would someone summarize it?
Hold on, I'd like to.
Oh, sorry.
It's kind of, I appreciate that you're reiterating what we said on our last meeting about not spending more than we take in. And it suddenly, I was struck by the fact that the citizens voted for a new tax to do something. And it appears that the council or the city, instead of taking the tax and spending it, is taking the tax and figuring out a way to spend more. Is that right?
I mean, marginally, right? It's-
The tax comes in however, people buy their sugar-sweetened beverages. The council has said we want to spend this much money on these programs. By and large, that's equal to the amount of the tax, give or take. But there's no reason that the council can't say we want to spend on these programs. And if SSB is 95% of the revenue, we'll just spend general fund on the rest of that, which is essentially what they're saying. It doesn't raise the tax. It doesn't create any new SSB revenue. It simply says these programs are going to be funded by this amount in total of
I
the
understand
general
that.
fund.
I get that, but it's just kind of, it's like, I don't think the citizens agreed to a vote for, okay, we're gonna raise this money. Now, you get to spend not just this money, but use this reason to spend even more money. Instead of doing it, like, we're the ones that are, it's just struck me that in the same meeting, you shouldn't be saying, okay, we're gonna talk about this use of this thing, but then it's like they're kind of manipulating the public to, we're gonna make you feel good by spending money that we didn't necessarily have, that we raised.
I think what gets lost in the process of the Sugar Sweetened Beverage Initiative is this public discussion. It's general fund money, and no matter how you cut it, it's going to come out of the general fund. The city could decide that none of the programs that have been previously funded are going to be funded because there's a financially difficult year. So I think the thing to keep in mind, and the thing the public might bear in mind as well, is that it's just general fund. It's not specifically targeted for these programs. So that's my thought.
It just doesn't make sense to me to budget expenditures that are above the revenue budget. Because when you look at the revenue.
But the revenue isn't specific for those expenditures. It's
No.
general fund.
Right.
It's
but,
recreation
It
budget.
is new money that was brought in, and the spirit of the measure was to spend it on these programs. So if we all agree that's the spirit of the measure, and we can look at historical receipts and see they're around 265,000 on average, then why are we budgeting 282,000 when the historical average is only 265? It just doesn't make sense to me to just put ourselves in the hole on this. And
I
it's a
agree.
relatively small amount, but.
You can talk about how they are potentially budgeted by the general fund, but if all of these, and I don't know if all of them were, but if all of them were actually created since the initiation of the sugar sweetened beverage tax, then I think they shouldn't exceed the amount of the sugar sweetened beverage tax. But if I don't know, the crossing guard program was in some way funded out of the general fund before, and now we're accounting for it as coming from SSB. That seems fine, but if these are in fact all new and incremental, and the money to pay for them is all incremental but doesn't cover them, then that is problematic.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So do we vote on the recommendation to the city council? Is that how it works? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to confirm, so I have the recommendation up on the screen from
Yeah.
last year, and the additional, basically the same, and with the deficit as well as adding to that the financial uncertainty, considering factors such as the closure of Golden Gate Fields and the rising cost of pensions and OPEB. Is that, okay,
That's fair.
okay,
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be the additional clause at the end.
That was my intent, yes.
okay, great. Yeah, we can summarize that and throw it in.
And will you?
Yes.
Want to do a,
So, do we have a motion?
Yes, we did.
we do.
Do, and then
I'll
second?
second.
Okay, and Vice Chair Bowman,
Yes.
Member Kerr,
Yes.
Chair Priven,
Yes.
and Member Papalia,
Yes.
Member Trainer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. The next one is the subcommittee updates. I know the pension subcommittee hasn't met. No, so no update.
We don't have an update at this time, but
We
you
do
and I
not.
need to talk.
Okay, revenue subcommittee? You just did a big
Yeah.
presentation, I know.
Yeah.
Okay,
How was that?
thank you, okay. Dashboard has largely been,
Yeah, no new update. Staff did a great job incorporating a lot of our feedback into the quarterly budget reports, and then we have the section for which we'll comment on pension and revenues, the various themes that we had highlighted. I can bring those up at next budget, and then some additions to the annual report we talked about. But other than that, nothing new.
okay. Thank you. Future agenda items.
I have from my notes from the last time that Cassie and Raina and I spoke that the May meeting would include a budget update and review for the most recent quarter, or the budget update and review for the biennial budget, and then the most recent quarter finance update, Q3.
The May-ish meeting that we were talking about earlier will have a Q3 update. The FY '24 true-up and FY '25 will come at the June meeting, and then to the council. So May for the Q3 to council as well, June to the FY '24, any budget amendments needed in FY '25 will also go in June. So those will be split across May and June for both the FAC and for the council.
Okay. Are there any other specific things people,
I just wonder if we should discuss potential alternate dates for the May meeting, or if we should do that online later.
I think it would be easier to poll people to find a date.
okay,
Yeah, we'll find something with clerk and then see availability after.
okay. Is there public comment on future agenda items? No. Okay.
Well, I'd like to get some feedback from y'all about doing a follow-up to the UC revenue and how their plans are in, and to incorporating revenue and services for the entire UC Village, perhaps, because I'm still unclear about, we just learned about $600,000 a year that could be coming in.
I believe that's related to that development.
Yeah.
And so
Just
that,
to the new development,
yes.
or to, but not, so I don't know what the MOU was, so I wasn't there for the meeting and how much it encompassed, but do you want me to follow up with trying to get more information about the special assessments there, and then Golden Gate Fields, the revenue stream. This was simply the revenue stream from real estate. So we know potentially what could be lost here, but we don't know what revenue could be lost from, or anticipated we could lose from sales tax and
We've already
yeah.
done, we have done that analysis and spoken to it, so we can cover that in the Q3 report as well.
I'd like us to maybe, as Revenue Subcommittee, sort of shift to enhancement strategies. Not where we're losing, but where we can enhance.
Thank you. Any other future agenda? Nope. Okay. So next meeting to be determined in May. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
That was a lot of work, thank you.
Yeah.
You're welcome. That's all I wanted to hear, you know, because I didn't know, because it was.
Research project, I mean.
Yeah, and one thing I can tell you, that dealing with the assessor's office, that I did. I found someone who I explained who I threw my weight around. I said,